Good morning and welcome to the Leadership Salon. Thank you to all of you joining us here in person and also to our audience joining via the live stream. And I would just re-emphasize that those people who are not lucky enough to be with us here in beautiful Tallinn can also submit questions to our panelists. So we only have 40 minutes, so let's get started. You have heard their names mentioned, and you can also get much more detailed bios on the website, but I just want to bring in a couple of points about each of our speakers to make everyone understand just why we have such a dynamic panel and why I'm very lucky to get to be moderating this today. So Ola Jakob Sunde, he is the chair of both the Scott Trust and the Tinius Trust, and I looked those up, and those are owners of the of some very key media, Norway's Aftenposten, Sweden's Aftonbladet, and also The Guardian, correct. So I had to really look into what this meant, but I'm really interested in what you have to say here. Ola, Elisa Alvares, she is the managing partner and the CIO of Global Intellectual Property for Tower Peak Partners. And Elisa leads the Global Rights and Intellectual Property Strategy, which is, of course, key here in the media environment, especially when we're talking about generative AI, something that journalists talk about a lot. Anssi Komulainen, he is a former employee of Yles Radio, where I also got my start as a foreign correspondent. Very excited to have you here, Anssi. And now you work for Citra, where you focus on AI adoption. So that is also a key question here for journalism. My name's Teri Schultz. I have been reporting from Estonia since 1989, which gives a clue about just how old I am, but also why I'm so honored to come back anytime I'm asked by ICDS. So thank you for having me here. Now, to get started, paneled on just Wednesday, just this week, I was reporting from Brussels, where I live, on the European Commission's new AI strategy called Apply AI. They're aiming to make Europe more tech independent, of course, of the United States, of China. But also there was an interesting statistic given there by the Commission. Only 13% of companies used AI last year. Meanwhile, consumers, are using it at a much higher rate. So this is an interesting gap here. And Oli, we're going to start with you. Our panel titles implies or presumes that Europe is a global innovation powerhouse. It doesn't sound to me, if only 13% of companies are using AI last year, that doesn't sound like a powerhouse. But anyway, we're going to keep the question. Can it remain a global innovation powerhouse? Or if it's not one, how can Europe become an innovation powerhouse?
Well, for the media industry, I think it's fair to say that, yes, we have been quite clever, not in shaping the foundational technology, but in adapting it. So if you look at the media industry in Europe in general, there are several companies that have been clever in how they have taken the strategies available and used it to change the media industry in Europe. So I think to some extent it's fair to say that it is a good news for Europe. Saying that, I think we have some lighthouses that have been clever in doing that, but for the whole industry, for the industry as a whole, I think we have a lot of work to do still. And of course, we are in constant transition in the media industry, so it never stopped. It's all the way from the digital start in the end of the 90s. We have been trying to figure out new business models, and we have to do that again.
And what are those examples? Just who's doing it well?
Well, I think Schibsted is doing it quite well. I think The Guardian is also doing it quite well. But there are others. I mean, Le Monde is doing it well. Axel Springer and several of the German media companies are quite far ahead. So I think there are many examples. And there are smaller ones also that are able to pick up how AI can be used in a constructive way in the media industry. So it's not all sort of bleak, but for the industry as a whole, I'm concerned.
Okay, that's interesting. But by what measure is it doing it well? How do you measure what that means?
How do you measure how technology is been working? I mean, I think you have to go to the different companies because If there's something in this transition that we're in that is key, is to keep a close eye on your audience. And I think that media companies, to a large degree, have been broadcasters, saying that it's one message for everybody, which is, of course, in the digital industry that we're living in now. You have to be very careful in how you learn the audience and how you present something that's of interest in the format and the time that the audience is willing to consume it.
It's very interesting, and we will have many more questions on that. But Elisa, similar question to you. How do you view the lay of the land coming from a different perspective? And you have spoken about a gap between creative talent and commercial thinking. So what does that mean, particularly when it comes to your expertise on intellectual property?
So from where we sit as financiers and very focused on the media and entertainment sector as part of our IP practice at Tower Peak, we embrace technology, first of all, and we are very excited about the fact that audiences have been embracing technology. This is the starting point. Whether Europe is or not at the forefront, I think there's the two sides, as we're saying, audience first, in my view, and this will lead changes to how the operators in the space change their business models. To the specifics of creativity versus commercial, what we would like to see, and are very hopeful that things are shifting at a much faster pace than previously here in Europe, is a more commercially minded attitude from those that create content and exploit content.
Explain that more. I work for public broadcasters. So what does this mean for people like us? Sometimes we're dinosaurs, but for example, I'm told all my stories need to be digital first now. So, I mean, I think we're trying.
Of course,
yeah.
Of course. Obviously, public broadcasters have a different remit, and where we come from, we're looking at delivering returns to our investors. So we look for commercially viable IP across different subsectors, of course. And I think primarily that's the connection between creating content or entertainment or information and connecting with the audience in a meaningful way, right? And looking for private capital to invest, that meaningful way also is looking at generating revenues.
And what about social responsibility? How much does that come into it?
That's very important to us. Our firm, and we are a multidisciplinary firm. In other words, we invest across different investment strategies and industries. Sustainability and energy transition has been the first investment fund that we launched to market about 15 months ago. And sustainability is part of our DNA. When it comes to investments in the intellectual property space, ESG is extremely important, and social responsibility, of course, is part of it.
Okay, very interesting. Again, we'll come back to you. But going to Anssi, again, going back to the title, it's hard for Europe to win and retain this reputation as a global innovation powerhouse when it is so deeply dependent on the United States when it comes to tech. And one of the things that you're doing is to try to help Europe become more tech independent. How is that going? And how hard is it?
How is that going? Well, first of all, when we think about and talk about AI adoption and sort of like leadership and sort of like innovation, I think the key things that we need is expertise. So we need to know what to do. Then we need capital. We need to have money to do it. And if we want to be sovereign about it, if we want to have sort of decisions at our own hands, then we need some sort of infrastructure to do it as well. And right now we feel that fragmentation is kind of like hindering us in all of these aspects.
Sorry, who is we believe this? You.
Oh, we as in kind of like in the Future Media Initiative, which is kind of like who I'm advising to, but also with Sitra, who's my employer at the moment. So basically, kind of like how do we join our forces as Europe? How do we pool our resources? How do we get our best people together to think of the solutions that kind of like would create an alternative for the big tech or the hyperscaler solutions? And how do we invest into the infrastructure that we are building, to enable our own alternative solutions? And how do we make sure that our industries are kind of capable and have the expertise to use this infrastructure to gain the competitive advantage that's needed? And of course, how do we gain the kind of the capital or the money to scale these solutions and bring them to the people? So we believe that it's actually the user experience where we should be really focused, and the application layer. So basically, people don't care where the GPUs are or what the infrastructure behind is. People want to have stellar experiences, and if we are not able to kind of bring people like top-notch digital experiences, we are going to lose control with the people, and that's kind of like where we lose the game, and where we lose the sovereignty and kind of European kind of value set within the community.
I definitely want to talk more about the Future Media Initiative because that's really key and very inspiring. But just on this topic initially, do you not think that people started caring more about the infrastructure when Elon Musk started changing what we knew as Twitter? Don't you think people started becoming more aware and perhaps more picky about that kind of aspect once things started getting so crazy?
Yeah, of course. I think like people do care about, for example, with data, people are more kind of like careful with how their data is being used and if they have control over their data, and that's definitely kind of a growing concern. And then TikTok and different media have kind of made parents worried about what kind of information are their children getting, and then kind of course adults are feeling also the kind of the kind of traction towards these services. And then you have, like you mentioned, then you have services which are controlled by certain individuals, and then have a say on the kind of like the information space that we have. So there's all kind of a growing concern. But I think when we refer to infrastructure, the biggest kind of worry was probably due to the tariffs and the kind of like the growing tension between superpowers and geopolitics. So we started understanding that if everything is a bargaining chip, maybe kind of like the AI capabilities or the data capabilities or data economics that we are running will, once again, if we are too dependent, we might end up in a situation where we are kind of too dependent, and we have to start negotiating for the basic sort of digital service that we have as a trading chip, with among other trading chips.
Right, very true. I mean, along with everything else, defense, and I mean, just sort of everything was on the table starting last January, it seems. But was that kind of a late wake-up call for Europe? Everybody kind of always knew that it would be nice to have more sovereignty. It would be nice not to be dependent on whatever happens in the U.S.
I think for people, it's an easy trade-off. So, is it in a sort of philosophical level? If you're asking people, that, okay, well, data, for example, if I enter a website, would I not like to give my data for free, and would I not like to, hand it out to people to be used for productizing me? Probably people will say like, yes, I do not like that to happen. But as soon as you land on a website and you have like all these questions and you're like, or cookies or
exactly.
stuff that you're choosing, it's kind of like, okay, what do I have to hide?
Go fast, you accept all, right?
So I think as a user, a consumer, I think people are like, as a principle, people are worried and people are concerned and actually quite aware of these things. But daily habits and how do we use these systems, it's just so easy to kind of skip that bit.
That's right.
And I think we are headed that way in sort of many aspects of our digital life.
Okay, I give my panelists, would any of you like to come back on something that has been said so far?
I can say that when it comes to legislation, it is the media industry is treated the same way as the big techs. So when it comes, for instance, to the GDPR and how that is treated, of course, I can say that big techs are treating data in general very different from media companies in Europe, but still we have sort of the same kind of rules. So that's, I think, is a difference. Just coming back to innovation and the title, I think that where European media companies have understood something important, and that is to keep a close eye on the direct relationship with the clients. And we have been more clever in how we build digital news sites that actually could attract the attention directly to our sites. If you compare to US companies, media companies, they have been struggling, or maybe not struggling, they have been interested in cooperating with the Googles and the social media sites because they believe that that can enhance the traffic. The difficulty now, of course, is with the AI, that traffic will be will fall away. Because to a large extent it will be a summary of the news that will meet you when you search anything, a news item, and not a reference to a news article in a reputable news organization. So
and it's hard to tell the difference, and the average user may not be able to.
I think that the media companies has to ask themselves some basic questions, and that is, what audience am I serving, and why do I do it? So very basic questions. Then they have to say, okay, what can I give that audience that AI can't give them? So you have to look at the product that you can give that is particular to the audience that you would like to address. And thirdly, how do I make my community care about me? And I think a lot of media companies is treating their clients more like a transactional relationship, and that's not how the world is working now, and particularly in the generations to come. You can have boomers like me paying for this withering news service, but it's not the future. So you have to turn it around and ask yourself some difficult questions.
And do you find that as well, Lisa? Does that explain, describe a lot of what you're working on? Because, of course, again, I'm not an expert on this, but a lot of concern by the average journalist out there is that our content is being used and chewed up and spit back out without any attribution to us, which can be we can be misquoted or or misrepresented, and then not have any control over our output.
Of course, it is a concern, and ultimately, and I think your point is incredibly important, is how to create new relationships with the audience, and understanding what the audience, the consumer, ultimately wants, and how to create lasting relationships, right? So it's about strengthening the brands,
yep.
And the importance of the trust that you, and certainly our generation, has in brands such as The Guardian, for instance, or the BBC, or here in Europe, so many others. And I think the challenge beyond that is that the new generation, they have been now trained to consume media in a completely different way. This brings disruption to business models, of course. But this is thankfully where I see a lot of creativity in Europe. Not only in Europe, but definitely here, where there seems to be a number of initiatives that are looking to tackle that. And it's going to take some time. And obviously, as financiers, we tend to be more reactive than active. We're not at the forefront of creating change in that way. But I'm super excited at what I'm seeing, and especially here in Europe.
I want to talk about the Future Media Initiative, but also just to mention, as one example, I work with an NGO which takes working journalists into classrooms with students as young as 11 and 12. And in Finland, they start training media literacy at 8, probably the other Nordic countries as well. Very, very young. Mm-hmm. And we found this to be very effective, but it's sort of a drop in the bucket that you go in and say, please look at my content because I have editors and I have fact checkers and you won't be wrong. And that is even trying to train young media consumers to feel like they don't want to be misled, to take responsibility for not being duped yourself. How does the FMI work with this? I'm really interested to hear more about that, and I think our audience would as well.
Just to touch first to talk about the kind of like trustworthiness. So I think we have to have more faith in kind of like in people who are using these things. I remember sort of like going to the UK in the 80s and seeing a sort of like a, I don't know what you call that, but a pink press maybe it was sort of like a paper saying that a vegetarian gave birth to a green baby, and you would have a picture of a green baby.
Yellow.
And
was there the green baby?
There was a picture of the green baby.
There's a photo.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, well, but it took me like a second to understand that maybe the picture isn't real, and maybe this doesn't.
Because we didn't know how to manipulate.
So I think people are right now kind of facing sort of like a new wave of new kind of pictures of green babies, and they might be moving and they might be really realistic. But if you
and they can talk at that age.
They can talk, yeah. But if you think about it, it's kind of it should be common sense to understand and kind of like assess that with your media literacy, like you said, with your own brain, and say like, okay, well, is that likely to be true? But obviously, it's getting really, really complicated and really, really tiring to consume news and all that. And I think that's where the great value of traditional media lies. That if we are entering a world where media is increasingly AI mediated, which necessarily isn't a good thing from a media perspective and sort of a perspective of trustworthiness of information and information space, but still, if we're entering into a world which is AI mediated, I think I kind of lost my thought there. But anyway,
trustworthiness.
Trustworthiness. So I think it's just that we have to really, really kind of like take a little bit of time and really pay attention to, okay, well, for a moment we will be lost there, but eventually we will start to understand the nuances and how do we kind of like face the tsunami of new kind of content. And I'm not so worried about the young people. I think they will be really like AI native really soon, but it's more like us boomers who are going to be sort of in trouble for a long time, because for us it is kind of like the old structures that are in place. But yeah, now coming to the point. So with the older structures, I think if you look at sort of like AI services that are pulling whatever they are catering to you from various sources, and you have no idea what the sources are, then you're in trouble. But if you are able to choose services that are using content from certain kind of like validated and trustworthy content providers, then you know that, okay, well, even though it's AI generated or the information comes from somewhere, if you are able to make a choice of choosing a service that uses, for example, Guardian's or Schibsted's archives as the source for whatever it's generating, of course you have a kind of a better trustworthiness there. And when it comes to future media,
that takes a lot of effort that takes willingness by the consumer to look for those things. And as you say, if they're AI natives, they've never had to look for it, or perhaps it's never been drilled into them that this is the better way to consume.
Well, I don't know, if we are kind of like press natives, we were able to kind of like choose our newspaper, because we kind of like knew that, okay, well, this one, you kind of like, as a child, you realize that, okay, this is not very
As a Finnish child.
As a Finnish child, but I believe that as a European child, you would kind of like realize that, and then kind of like, well, some other outlets would be more trustworthy. So I think it's kind of like a new world that we have to enter to and learn the game, but it's not going to be easy, and I think it's going to be harder for the older people like myself.
It's like...
But I think if I can just bring in your perspective, because we seem to be talking about all the challenges and the perhaps with a certain negativity around
fears.
But let's not forget. I think first of all we're going through the new industrial revolution, and it's inevitable that there's I think resistance, but. We have to embrace it and look for the how to optimize the tools that we are being given. And this is where I think the European angle comes into place so importantly, because here in Europe we have a tradition of, for the better or for worse, but regulating parts of society that we feel need to be regulated, unlike in other parts of the world. And where Europe can be at the forefront is really how to protect individuals from the less beneficial or entirely toxic, potentially, effects of AI in media.
Okay, Ole wanted to come back. And then I do want questions. It's very hard to see here, so if somebody is has a question, please make sure I can see you or the person with the microphone, more importantly, and I have a question from online as well.
Okay. I think we have a transition problem that hasn't been mentioned yet, and that is that currently the business model of news, we can talk about the greatness of news and that we need it in society and that we will distinguish what is trustworthy or not. I'm not sure about that. I can comment on that afterwards if you want me to. But the business model is broken.
Of traditional media, you mean?
I'm sorry?
The business model of traditional media.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the basic is that if you look at how the revenues are constructed, it's reader revenue and it's advertising, and advertising is already being eaten up, at least in the digital space, by the big tech companies. So we have to rethink how we can keep part of that, or at least a portion of it. And when it comes to the reader revenue strategies that we have, they're also being busted. I mentioned a little bit earlier about how big tech will summarize news, and people will go directly there, and there will not be any reference traffic. But also the propensity to pay is, of course, low. If you go to the young generation, they don't pay for news. Exactly. I mean, they regard it as a public good. They might pay for music. Now YouTube is taking that, and they might pay for films through Netflix. But I mean, you have to think about how you could be able to monetize that kind of traffic. So my fear is that while we're thinking about these things, a lot of media companies in Europe will go bust. I don't think they will survive. And what I'm saying is because we have talked about at this conference a lot about defense and how we defend Europe and increasing our defense spending. But this is the first sort of media-oriented discussion. And I do think that we need to pay much more attention to media as part of the defense of the democracies that we have in Europe. Because if you don't have reliable information to the public, then what do you have? It's taken over by either Russia propaganda or American big tech, who is...
when they work together, are particularly toxic.
Yeah, that's right. It's toxic.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Absolutely. And we are in the middle. Even if I'm optimistic on the course we are traveling, I'm very worried about how long time it will take and if we can finance the transition.
But the trustworthiness that you said you had a point you wanted to make on that. I think that's essential because we, as journalists, we are very aware that people no longer trust us or no longer, sort of automatically trust us, and that you have to work very hard to get that, even when you work for really established news media.
Yeah. No, I can comment on that. I think that
the kids don't care. This is the problem. That's how it feels. It feels like the kids don't care. And maybe I'm just an old person.
No, they care. I mean, they care. At least the research that we've been doing, they care. Okay. Now, on the one side, you have, of course, the institutional trust, and that's really that has carried the media so far. But on the other side, you have personal trust. You trust an individual. And if you look in the digital space, the personal trust is now much bigger. you don't really trust the elite. You trust a person that shares your views and that has told you things in a short video clip about a topic that is of your interest, and you agree with him or her. And then gradually you will develop more trust in that individual. And you see it also on platforms like Substack and others where experts, more or less, it depends who you follow, will talk about subjects, and they also carry a lot of trust. So I think the media really has to strive to maintain the institutional trust, and that's not self-evident.
Very true. Do you want to come in on that? Oh, go ahead. I already asked you about trust, but also about propaganda. That was one of the questions I was going to talk to.
Propaganda.
The Russian propaganda that is really eating away at I would say the consumer's reality here. Even people who do have healthy skepticism, healthy critical thinking skills, are sometimes duped, and isn't that a big concern as well? I thought maybe FMI is looking at that as how to counter that.
Well, Russian propaganda. I don't think that's one of our topics. So basically, what FMI is a sort of network of 50 plus media companies from Europe, and what we're trying to do is we are trying to kind of tackle the biggest challenge that we feel in the European media space, which is fragmentation. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to kind of collectively innovate and understand where the future is going, and then pilot, test different kind of solutions, how to tackle the challenges that we see ahead, and create competitiveness for European media outlets. And the way we do it, we try to pool resources, we try to exchange our kind of like learnings, and then align our investment, and both kind of like private investments coming from private sector players, and then public investments coming from public service media and European Commission. So basically what we are trying to do, we are trying to kind of align our initiatives, and kind of propaganda. I think that
sounds like competitiveness through collaboration.
That's what we're aiming at, and I think.
Did you already use that slogan? I think it's a good one.
We'll start to use it from now. But I think propaganda is more on kind of like in the content front, and we feel that it's mostly about sort of reach of our messages to people. So basically, if I'm trying to kind of like bridge it to kind of sort of messages that are propagandist, I think the problem would be that it's the exposure of messages that people get to. So if you only expose to certain kind of messages, and if you flood it with certain kind of messages, it's very difficult to kind of understand, what the reality is. So for us, the big question is reach. So how do we get our messages across? How do we get our content across to people? And how do people find whatever they are looking for from our outlets? So that is a big kind of like the user experience question. And then when it comes to worrying bits about, for example, certain content coming from certain countries is kind of like in the foundation level in terms of AI training. So a lot of the models, regardless if they come from the US to China or Europe, they are flooded with sort of like disproportionate number of content coming from, for example, from Russia. So it's kind of like built into these systems hypothetically.
Makes sense.
How it kind of performs, we don't know. But these are kind of like the worrying questions. Like, okay, well, if the propagandist aspects get into AI sort of like in a foundational level, then we are kind of like in a world which we can't understand.
Okay, I have tons of questions coming in.
Compliments.
Okay, just quickly. Is there anybody in the room? I can't see with the line. Okay, yes. I'll take one question here. Is that okay? And I have 7 questions now here, and I would really like to get to some of them. Yes. And introduce yourself, please. We can't see.
Yes, thank you, Mari Selrand. I'm with the conference, but actually putting on my other small publisher hat.
Oh, it is you, Mari.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were kidding that you were going to come ask a question. I'm super happy.
I'm here with my publisher hat. I'm part owner of a small local newspaper, and I can, on a small island community, and I can very much relate to all these worries about the revenue streams that Ola was talking about. We are seeing it on a very sort of grassroots level. But there's another point that I wanted to make, and maybe this can be worked out. What we have found that our readers, they don't need news from us. They get news from everywhere. What they do need is identity and community. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that we can provide them, that ChatGPT or Google Gemini will never be able to provide. So we are trying to focus on that. And my question is leading to this innovation thing. A lot of media companies are tempted, I think, to implement AI to provide individualized content to their readers. We've seen what that has done to the global population on social media, the polarization and fragmentation. Isn't that temptation maybe making this same mistake all over again? Maybe, I don't know, whoever.
Well, we only have 2.5 minutes left, basically, so maybe I'm going to take, is there anybody else in the room? Otherwise, I'm going to take a couple of these online, and then we'll have final remarks. We've answered some of them, I think, but this, I think, Elisa, would be directly to you. Do we need to renegotiate what IP is? That's an interesting question for you. I think, okay, let me just put these out there, and then we'll all each have an answer. Let me see if there's others that we haven't. To what extent has the value of media companies changed? I think we've talked about that. And also a good question from an anonymous user: what gives you hope? We can incorporate that in our final answers, because we really only have time for one more round. So Elisa, I'll go to you first. Do you think we need to renegotiate what IP is in this environment?
That's both a legal question and commercial, I guess. We heard yesterday the Director General of the World IPO, an international organization that deals precisely with regulation, and well beyond that, I learned yesterday, in terms of harmonizing the approach to intellectual property across the various country members. I don't see that there's a need to renegotiate IP. What there is a real need for is the technical tools that will allow the IP owners and those that benefit from IP to protect it.
And Ola, maybe you have a good answer to Maris's question. You're closest to the.
Yeah, I don't think that AI necessarily means that it's equal personalization. I think AI is a way you could produce journalism of interest that is relevant to the audience much faster and better than you have so far. So I'm very positive in integrating AI into the editorial process. For instance, one important deficiency of current media is too text-based. We are all thinking in text, but we do need to think in audio and in video. And if you have a text-based article, we are now testing how we can make that into a video thanks to AI. Which is, of course, a fascinating use and will also help a small regional newspaper in a format that they haven't so far not been able to produce themselves.
That's interesting. It might not help TV journalists like myself, though. I have a question that may go we're out of time. Anssi, a quick one. Maris, can I go over time? Okay, I'm going to take 1 more minute and then answer also the question of what gives you hope. This is a question, would people not want to, maybe also this goes to you, Ola, media companies could pivot and become the advocates for serious and true news. Can this not become a competitive advantage and indeed a business model?
I think we are.
We're already having to.
Absolutely. I mean, we have to be in the forefront of what is relevant to the audience. I've repeated that several times. So I think that without that, we are out of business.
That also goes to her question a bit, or the experience of the small paper. So just the final quick sort of lightning answer, what does give you hope? And you have all mentioned it a bit, but just to sum up, what gives you the most hope? Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I do think that there are a lot of things that AI can do for us that can, as I said, produce things better. I also think that there are pockets of revenues that we could be able to find in this new world. So
That would be great.
I'm both pessimistic in the short term, but I do think that if you do the right things and have the right mentality and sort of are able to bury our darlings and learn from other industries and take it in the stride and understand that we don't have much time, I think we can survive. But it's going to be tough.
Okay. And we don't have a choice, Elisa, as you said, right?
I think that I'm very hopeful. And I'm very bullish about this industry and the opportunities that lie ahead. With specific regards, and let's not forget, media is beyond information, is entertainment as well. And perhaps there's some inspiration that journalism could take out of other parts of media, entertainment in particular, thinking in particular about music and how it went through a very shaky time before recovering and beyond, and audiovisual, which a little bit later has gone through similar challenges and now re-emerging much stronger. So it's down to creativity.
Okay. And future media initiative, future media optimistic?
I'm very optimistic. I think we're in the verge of like new era. I mean, we have all these super tools that are available for us. We can, it can boost our creative potential. It can kind of, do our boring job instead of us, doing it for ourselves. And I think it's a great opportunity, and I think we just have to learn how to deal with it. But I'm full of like excitement and thinking it's a bright future. Honestly,
that's a great way to end. And that time went so quickly. I'm sorry. Thank you so much to those of you who joined us in person. Again, those of you who joined us online, and remember, stay in touch with everything from the Tallinn Digital Summit at #TDS2025. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.